Welcome back to the Edge podcast. We have a very special episode today, the first in-person episode. Our guest today was the Colorado State champion in the 300 hurdles and the sixth fastest state in state history. Currently a senior at the University of Colorado at Boulder. He qualified for nationals this past season and has scored at Pac-12s every season he's participated in. And he's studying electrical engineering and has plans to pursue a master's in finance. Also a very good friend. We had a chance to really connect at Nike. So super excited he's here. Thank you so much for taking the time, Garrett.
Of course, thanks for having me, man.
Would love to start off with what we're currently doing, where we're currently at, Texas Relays, first kind of outdoor event of the season. Just curious, your expectations coming into this meet and kind of how it's gone so far.
Sure. So this is my third time coming here, and Texas Relays is one of those meets. There's two major meets this weekend. So there's Florida Relays, University of Florida, and then Texas Relays, and pretty much every major school in the country goes to either one of these meets. And this is technically like the second big weekend of the outdoor season, and this meet is always just kind of where people drop their fast times, shows you who put in the work in the indoor season, who really was just waiting for the outdoor season to start. And coming into it, it's always a big, not shock in the sense of like I'm not prepared for it, but it's always okay. This is Division I college track and field. These people are monsters. You can watch any event yesterday and you'll see world leads, national leads, just going off every race, every heat. So it's a big deal,
For
and
sure.
definitely exciting.
Yeah. How's the jump in, I guess, nervousness or just like the way you approach different meets change from like your first time? Let's take this event specifically, like your first time you were at Texas Relays versus like now.
Yeah, I think part of being specifically a track and field athlete is kind of learning to have that detachment where you understand that you're nervous, but allow it to do something for you, and that goes for any sport. I just think track and field is one of those where you really have to be prepared to leave everything out there in such a short amount of time. And so when you approach Texas Relays, definitely my first time was, I would say I was definitely shocked my first time. Especially I was in that 4x4 for the prelim, and just kind of seeing all these schools that you've grown up around, LSU, Florida, these absolutely just built programs, and running against them for the first time, because for the indoor season you're pretty separated, kind of you have your West Coast and East Coast schools. And Texas Relays was really my first meeting with them, understanding that, you're in the big leagues, this is one step down from the pros, and this is where you're racing against future pros at the same time. And so coming into that meet for the first time versus now is a major difference.
Gotcha. And coming into I guess any high level meet like this, how do you, someone who's been super successful obviously in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and Jan, what was the first time you realized shoot, there's people a lot of the people are as fast, not faster than me,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you continue to have that motivation to still work on your things and still come in with the positive attitude? Because you can't come in just thinking, oh, I'm not really gonna win, right? You still have to
Right.
have that
Yes, track and this is I keep going back to track and field just because it's where I specialize, but track and field is so black and white as of it's a time, it's a number.
Yeah.
It's not basketball, what was your impact? It's not football, what was your impact on the team? It is, you ran this time, this person was faster than you. And kind of my approach, you were asking about that first time that I really experienced that. My freshman year, very first travel trip, went to Arkansas. That is one of the best schools in the nation consistently every year. They just won the indoor, both men and women divisions this year, so they are, as good as they've ever been, right? And so I went to that meet, and there were freshmen my age dropping times 2 to 3 seconds faster than me in a sprint, event. And granted, it's not hurdle, so it's not my actual event, but still, that was where kind of that shocking moment where you see this is not going to be as easy as I thought it was. You're not, it's kind of the classic thing. High school, you're a big fish in a small pond. You move up to the big one in college. It's the same thing. Everything's just amplified the higher you go up. So that was definitely my first shock, and then kind of coming back now, bringing it back to your question of how do you treat it every time, because you can't have that expectation that you're not going to win. But it's just a different mindset where you accept. It's taken me a few years now, probably till this season, to accept it's going to take a lot more work than I thought it would. But I just have to accept I'm not going to win everything, but I have to be focused on those races where I have to win, and that counts towards the championship meets, the conference meets, and then of course making it to nationals.
Definitely. Something I'm like fascinated by, is mainly because I'll probably never come close to like realizing this for me, is like my like athletic peak or like my physical peak, right? So for you, curious to know like where you think you've kind of like maxed out your, I don't know, it's like limited to genetic potential, but just whatever your ceiling is there.
Yes. No, I think that's an excellent question, and I think going back to my time in Arkansas, that was when I realized the genetic difference that maybe some people really are just gifted. And this is kind of just a personal anecdote about track and field. Some of the people that are the best are the ones that try the least, and they are quite seriously just that gifted. And so when I got to college, I understood. I think college was that gap. Of course, my very first meets as a collegiate athlete were some home meets at Boulder, and those are meets like I did very well in those. PR'd. I was very comfortable, and that's actually surprisingly, I hate to say it, but my freshman indoor 400 PR, or my 400 PR just in college is from my freshman year, because I still had that mentality of high school where I'm a beast, like I'm the best there's ever been, right? And so I was very comfortable in that. The next meet after that, I went to Arkansas, right? And that's where I realized, okay, there are people that are just built different. And so college was that realization where it's no longer going to be as easy as high school. You know, there are meets sometimes, like at our conference meets, I would take a nap, like right up to the race, I'd wake up and run, and I could win it and just smoke everyone. It was a breeze. I didn't even have to try. And so now I realize college was really where I accepted I have to go 100% or not at all on this. And so, like when you're asking where that shift was the very first time I was exposed to that bigger pool, and just understood that this work is more than, the work I have to put in is more than anything I've ever experienced with sports.
Gotcha.
So, hopefully that answers your
question. No, definitely, We'd love to shift gears a tiny bit, and just thinking about why Colorado. Obviously, you know, you're originally from Florida. So what was your college recruitment process like, and ultimately what led you to come to Colorado?
Colorado, so believe it or not, Colorado was my only offer just because of how late I was in the season. So I didn't really pop off till my state meet. And so at my state meet is where I dropped a second in the prelims off my PR, and I dropped another second off my time in the finals. So I PR'd by 2 seconds in a sprinting race. Like if you consider just the 400, right, an even longer race, 2 seconds is monumental. That takes you from not making nationals to winning nationals. And so to do that and to win state, that's what put me on the map. And then Colorado was the one that reached out, and ultimately my kind of thing was, considering how much time you have to put in, I really wasn't going to do it for free. You know, I wasn't willing to just walk on, because that would ultimately hurt my academic performance, right? If I'm not really getting much out of the sport itself. So, but once I got the offer, that was just kind of my calling to say, okay, like I have a chance in this. And then I've been fortunate enough to kind of work my way up to higher scholarships every year, and that's ultimately what's bringing me back to get a master's as well. So that kind of recruitment process was just by chance, kind of a lucky circumstance that money was left over at Colorado, and then over time kind of built that up to be more meaningful towards my, I guess, funding for college.
Definitely, I think it's something that not a lot of people know is a lot of sports, or like a lot of student athletes in a lot of Division I sports don't have like full ride scholarships. Right, so we'd love to hear kind of from the track angle how that's been, having to like kind of compete to make sure you can like cover school costs and everything else, alongside some other like sports that many people might not know about.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I think we were talking about this yesterday, where football and basketball are very common examples of big team sports that offer only full scholarships. So you see those videos, guys are like, you got a scholarship, right? That's 100% of everything. Track, the ability to dish out partial scholarships is what allows you to build teams, because you're going to have, among all the different sections of what track and field consists of, between distance, multis, sprints, and throws, you have a lot of people in each of those event groups. You have full, if you consider a basketball team, maybe 15, 16 people, right? You have 15, 16 people, men and women, in each of those sections. And so the ability to divvy up maybe 2 to 3 scholarships, right? And you consider maybe that's $120,000. You can section that off into a bunch of different people. It makes it so you can get a lot more attention, a lot more athletes into your team, and a lot more talent spread out. And so, but it does kind of introduce, like you were saying, a little bit of conflict of interest where I want to get paid and I want my college experience to be funded because ultimately it benefits me. But I also want to bring in additional people, say for, I made it for a national qualifier in the relay. If there's another guy running 45, I mean, we're scoring, right? We're making the final for the national championship, which is major. I mean, that's amazing. And so, but that takes away from my ability to increase myself. And then ultimately, you don't want to run the sport for money. But part of my motivation is because I've worked so hard is what's allowed me to go to grad school. And so I have to have that motivation and that ability to work my way up, which is maybe something that other sports don't have, right? You kind of get all or nothing. Whereas I have, each year my coach has been appreciative enough with me, I guess, to up my scholarship each year. But no, it's definitely an interesting dynamic. People don't really think about that or understand that. Sometimes when I tell people I'm on a scholarship, they assume that I'm on a full, just because what the typical situation is like. But it's just kind of the intricacies of the sport itself differing from what you might consider a more traditional team sport.
Gotcha. Yeah, and thinking about like mentioning your coaches, you've been appreciative enough of you to give you or raise your scholarship, but thinking about like the impact that has on like team chemistry, right? Because how many, or let's start with how many, like in the universe or like per year, how many times would you run?
Sure. Indoors, typically we run 4 to 5 times. So at least for Colorado, we typically have 2 home meets, which are, by the way, those are some of my favorite meets. Our kind of track is, it's very kind of tight, and we have a really, really nice indoor track. Probably one of the best facilities on the west side of the United States. And just like people lining everything, and it's Boulder, you're kind of like, you're there to win your meet. It feels very good. Anyway, that's a little side note, but typically 4 meets, and a very typical schedule would be a local meet and a travel meet. And then, so that's for indoors, you'd have a home meet. Typically we go to Arkansas or sometimes New Mexico, home meet again, and then our conference meet is that last weekend of February, and we typically go to Washington for that. That's like Pac-12 indoor championships. And then once you get to outdoors, the schedule kind of varies a little bit, and you also have the potential for some of your teammates to go to different meets, just depending on if there's a 400 runner versus a 400 hurdles runner, where the competition might be, and also just depending on your injury cycle, right? So like this was a meet potentially where I had the potential to run at Texas Relays and Texas State, like I was telling you yesterday. And so because I didn't make the relay because I'm just not in excellent shape right now, I ran my prelim race at Texas and then went to Texas State. But that 2-week cycle is pretty common. I'm going to be most likely running in between those weekends as well, just considering the work I have to do to kind of catch up to everyone. But you kind of see, those big meets every 2 weekends, and then you get to that championship season especially. It's very segmented where you don't have meets in between. And it's your conference meet, the regional meet, and the national meet.
Gotcha.
And then if you're really good, you can make it to USA's.
Yeah. So ultimately, you have like less than like 15 times attempts.
Yeah.
Right. Per year.
When you consider, you have all of March, all of April, all of May, and then somewhat into June. So you're, I guess that's about 6 or 7 times that you're racing.
Yeah. Wow. So how's that impacted, or I guess we were thinking about talking about team chemistry. How do you balance, like now obviously you're a senior, probably leader on the team, and kind of a lot of freshmen look up to you. So how is that balancing being like, okay, I still need to be like a mentor, and obviously want everyone to succeed, want us to win, but it's like my ability to go to school relies on me like performing, right?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting kind of. I guess you're kind of hinting at the aspect of helping your teammates versus the money that you get in return. No, I really don't consider it like that. There's always, considering how staggered the years are, you always have someone graduating who has money. Typically your older guys are worth more, right? They're more experienced, they're more in shape. So every year you kind of have money being freed up and returned back. So not necessarily worried about that and assisting my teammates, especially if I like a teammate, I really try to give them that. But as far as mentoring and stepping up, it's funny, the other week, like when I was a freshman, there was a guy, Aaron McCoy, and he's a 400 hurdler, and really close friends, lived with him for 2 years. But he was kind of not necessarily my mentor, but someone who was better than me at my event, someone I really liked, cared for as a friend, and then also was kind of a guide for where I wanted to be. Yeah. He always was able to get one step further than I did every year. And ultimately he graduated, and now I'm closing in on his PR and trying to be better than him. But now I have someone new who used to be me, right? And it's, Aaron was 2 years ahead of me. This new guy is 2 years behind me. And so it's just kind of, it's really interesting to see that full circle, but not at all worried about assisting him, because he's a 400 hurdler as well. Not at all. I mean, I probably tell him too much stuff, right? Like you know, of course your actions speak louder than your words, and sometimes I tell him everything, anything he would want to hear, right? And then maybe I don't exemplify everything perfectly, but no, that mentorship is definitely there. But yeah, it was just kind of funny to see that full circle finally coming back.
Yeah, and would love to, I guess that's a perfect transition to NIL and kind of the opportunities that now is available for all athletes to supplement their like regular earnings, or just, you know, obviously help pay for school in some cases. So what has that been like for you at Boulder, just in terms of like the educational opportunities that they're providing you, the resources, and just like watching your peers like be like content creators or like do different kinds of things?
Of course it depends on the person, right? So I'm someone kind of on a drastic end with NIL, where I'm not big on any social media, right? It's just something I never really clicked with, and never really found a meaning for. And I will admit, now that I've kind of been expanding into business, I've had multiple people tell me that I need to start doing this and actually kind of realize this worth later. But as far as NIL, and specifically talking about the educational section at Boulder does an excellent job. So they kind of separate it into two parts, where they tell you the actual kind of the nitty gritty stuff of NIL. There's the taxes of it, the actual steps, the legal action you have to take, because it is a new thing. You know, it's not as regulated as some of the older processes within the NCAA. But they tell you everything you need to do to kind of legally declare, here are my deals, you have to submit these to the school. Of course, some of them have to be kind of somewhat approved, right? And then on the other hand, they have something called Buffs of the Brand, which is actually nationally recognized. As we have a very successful professor from the business school come in from I believe it's the Entrepreneurship section, come in and actually teach us and kind of break down how do you build a brand and how do you build yourself up, because it's not so much where you're starting a business, you yourself are the business. And NIL standing for that name, image, and likeness, you are owning that and monetizing yourself, which is a very new thing for people as young as we are. You know, maybe a pro athlete would hire an agent and have someone kind of build this image up for them, tell them what to say in PR, right, in interviews. Now you have people who are young, fresh out of high school, having to build themselves up and create a brand with something they know nothing about, and then also manage everything else they want to do, right? All the partying, all the extra stuff that maybe they shouldn't be doing, right? And how do you balance that? And it's very hard to do so. So Boulder is kind of taking, I believe, the right approach with it, and kind of offering those sessions. You don't have to come, but it is highly encouraged. And you get Ulster money, which I was telling you about, which kind of builds on NIL. We can touch on this, but you get Ulster money for attending these sessions. Wow. So they are providing you very valuable information on how to capitalize on yourself, your NIL, your name, image, and likeness, but then also rewarding you at the same time by paying you for attending these sessions. Yeah. Wow. So it's an excellent job at Boulder.
Yeah. Has that, obviously definitely want to touch a lot on kind of the business venture you've been kind of thinking about, but how has just like NIL being just like present and you just like seeing people take charge and learn about business themselves, right? Instead of just like outsourcing it to an agent or anything else like that, how has that like helped spur your thought process of, okay, I want to start creating something, or I just want to do something externally outside of just like, you know, school and high sport?
Right. Well, there's different ways to think about it, and I've spent some time on this. And so kind of touching back on social media, I'm not huge, I'm not a massive presence on that. And so my innate ability as, say, a track and field athlete, which is a sport that gets less attention from a broader market, right? I don't necessarily have that pull for businesses to reach out to me. Because, you know, maybe a basic follower account that might meet the requirements of a deal. I don't quite meet those at the moment, right? And I don't really plan to meet those. Potentially, right, if I was to become, say, a national champion, that is where I could step out and brands would actually want to reach out to me. But as far as NIL and the impact that it's had on, say, teammates, absolutely. I mean, they're kind of realizing, I think in one regard, it teaches you your self-worth, right? Just kind of understanding that you do have a place and people are looking up to you even when you don't realize it. And I even experienced this with people I looked up to in the NCAA. Like I was talking about Aaron, my old teammate, right? There's a guy, Cass Elliott from Washington, who I think is very close to how I run my race with the 400 hurdles. And so I've always looked up to him and followed his times. But you do have that kind of, you're becoming an image for people that you don't realize. And so NIL is kind of exemplifying that, where businesses are now also looking at you and people are taking the time to analyze, okay, like I am worth something. I may be a freshman in track and field, but there are people looking up to me, NIL businesses looking up to me. And so that idea, getting people to think about that, I think has been huge. And it's only going to increase. And then kind of talking about myself and where I plan to take this new idea with Jeremy Cody and I from ASU is kind of building on that image where now that people are getting this money and understanding that they have a place in business before they even graduate college, it's not something where you're still learning. Like you can be building and going through the business idea as a student athlete and still in college at this point. And you can be introduced to this world earlier than you thought. And so NIL is kind of bringing that to the forefront, and then Jeremy and I are kind of trying to work on a way to expedite that process so that you can have a full understanding before you graduate college. And that goes beyond maybe some of the stuff that the universities are currently offering, as I don't believe that is a section where it fully introduces you to the world of what money is and the influence it has on the world and on yourself, and just ultimately the things that you can do with it aside of, not spending it, right? But you understand this as a finance major, right? Money is an incredibly complex idea, right? When you consider just the idea of what money is, and giving this ability to these student athletes is huge. And so, don't want to go too long on this question.
Yeah.
It's just a very interesting idea that's being presented now that we've never seen before.
Yeah, and so we'd love to get a little bit more context on the idea, and love for you to like kind of formally introduce the idea. I don't know if, what stage you guys are in building. I don't want you to really say anything early, but wherever you feel comfortable sharing.
Absolutely. So the idea, we've decided on a name finally, Finletics. And so kind of that idea of fintech, financial technologies, constantly emerging market. I know yourself are interested in that. And so Finletics, building on athletics, specifically to deal with student athletes. And the idea came from all these processes that we're talking about, Alston money and NIL. I don't know how familiar you are with Alston, but it allows student athletes to be eligible up to $6,000 per year. And so the school can divvy that out. And it depends on how the school decides to do that. Mm-hmm. And not every school has passed this. Not every school is Alston, eligible. But Boulder, for example, how they do it is, I was talking about those sessions earlier, the buffs with the brand, and then they call them the gamble steps for the NIL section. But how that works is you can attend up to 5 sessions, and they have a multitude of sessions, and some of them are considered Alston eligible. But you can earn up to $1,000 for attending 5 sessions. It's kind of breaking down these sections of when I say student athletes are getting access to money they've never had before. This is essentially what I'm saying. And so you have Alston, that kind of percentage, and it's up to the discretion of the school, whatever their proxy is for divvying out that money, or if they want to do it in the first place. I actually don't know if Texas does Alston. I believe it does.
I haven't heard too much about Alston, so.
But yeah, you should ask around. But I know it's very different depending on the school. But anyways, so you have up to $6,000 student athletes. So bam, $6,000 is quite a bit of money from people. Say depending on how you grew up, what that means to you. But that can be a tremendous amount of money, especially if you consider the world of investing, which is I'll touch on a second. What Jeremy and I are trying to introduce can be monumental. I mean, that's all you need to really grow a very solid foundation. And then NIL, of course, as you know very well. And just to give you an example, at the Buffs of the Brand session, they brought up this example of a 5th string UCLA quarterback. So this guy is not really getting play time. People don't know him very well. He earned up to $100,000 in NIL deals last year. A 5th string quarterback going to UCLA. And so that goes to show you the power of NIL for people who are really committed. And the professor that taught this, right, that we're talking about, was very honest. And he said he just reached out to everyone. And he was very good at explaining his worth when at a glance you might look at his resume and say, 5th string quarterback, I don't know this guy, right? But he fully understood his worth and made it work for him, and he understands his brand and markets it very well. And it can be up to you to decide if that's a good use of his time off the field, and maybe he should be focusing on getting some playtime first. But at the same time, he is really capitalizing on this effect. And so to kind of come back to your question, launch this. So Finletics is essentially trying to introduce this to student athletes, where you can provide an all-in-one service where student athletes can come in and say, hey, I have an extra $5,000 a year that I was never having access to after they pay their rent or whatever, or their tuition, right, or just savings, right? They say, I have extra money I've never had access to before. I also don't necessarily have the time to go get a job, right? So the average student might just say, this is my savings, right? I'm gonna go get a job, whatever, I have free time outside of school. A student athlete doesn't necessarily have that luxury, and that's something that Jeremy and I found where before NIL and Alston really popped off, we didn't have any money, right? This idea of learning how to trade and to day trade, which is not necessarily a glamorous idea in itself, was essentially born out of necessity, right? We had a teammate introduce this topic to us and get us interested. We said, why not? Let's just explore with it. And that really took off from there, where we both realized we were in the exact same situation. And so once we kind of completed this process, essentially educated ourselves. Of course, there's a community out there of people who do this for a living. You learn as much as you can from them, but you take notes along the way of how poor this structure was for us to actually grow up in. And so now that we're at the end cycle of it, we're trying to bring it back to student athletes who are interested in this. And we kind of got the confidence to do this just from asking our teammates, saying, hey, I would love to test my skills in teaching you. Would you be willing to follow along with me and to learn this? And so after getting pretty positive responses, right, especially from Jeremy and myself, we kind of realized that people are interested in this. And specifically dealing with student athletes, you have that access to money that normal students don't. You also have a limited time capacity that most students don't. And you also find people that, if you were to describe, I wonder how you would describe a student athlete. We can touch on this next. But just, you would describe them as someone who, regardless of the sport, right, they're someone who's had to work hard at something. Just at a baseline, right?
Definitely.
You're not making the college team unless you've worked hard at something. And being around student athletes, right, for such a long time now, I wouldn't necessarily describe everyone as consistent or dedicated, but at a core, they have the ability to work hard. And so when you take at least just that basic mindset, student athletes themselves have potentially a better understanding of just the constant grind that you need to put in for something. So if you can take the extra money, that limited time capacity, but a good mental structure, I think you can have amazing results. And that's where this idea of Finletics was born, kind of building on Jeremy and I's experience to kind of build past this, and then also bring others with us.
That's awesome. And I think one thing that a lot of people also don't really think of, and I didn't really think of it for the longest time until I had a chance to play pickup against a D1 athlete, and I could tell he was going like 10% speed, and he was just still getting wherever he wanted on the court, just easily. It was effortless. So for me, it was like, what percentage of, let's say all the way up to 18 years old, how many people have put in that, the 10,000 hours, right, to become to master something, to be a master, right? And I would estimate probably 95% of people haven't, and the rest of the 5%, 99% of that 5% are the people who go play college, play their sport in college. Right? Had obviously Derek Moss on first episode, reigning NCAA champion, SEC champion swimming. He's been swimming since he's 3 years old, 4 years old, right? So it's that's an excellent point for Finletics. I love the idea. So what is the ultimate goal for Finletics? Let's say right now you could have the entire product built out, you have everything. What's the core goal, and where do you see this going? Either as a partner program, financial kind of literacy, as well as just business building thing in each university, or kind of what's your vision for Finletics?
So I will try my best to summarize it all. Jeremy has kind of been our visionary for the product,
just for listeners, can you give a little bit of background on Jeremy?
Sure, yes. Jeremy Cody is currently a high jumper at ASU. He's the same age as me, and so we're juniors athletically, but seniors academically. Anyways, Jeremy is an excellent guy. I don't know his accolades personally. I do know he was a national qualifier for the high jump last year. So he is a top tier, top of the nation high jumper, and a very dedicated individual who I was fortunate enough to be in the same situation as with my kind of financial journey, where we started 2 weeks apart. And so Jeremy, how I actually met him in the first place is he used to go to Colorado, and he was there for my first 2 years at Colorado before transferring to ASU. And so I'm very happy that we've gotten to stay in touch and kind of build this journey, because he has really opened my eyes to all the things that are potential or possible with this, with kind of the experience that we have that differs from most student athletes or people our age just in general. I'm blanking on the question that I was
just
talking
your
about.
ultimate vision.
Ultimate vision,
Yeah.
yes. So Jeremy is excellent with kind of coming up with these ideas. If I had to describe the goal or the vision of Finletics, just as a whole, is an all-in-one encompassing idea for your financial journey. And so that's a very broad idea, and perhaps I'm not saying the exact words, maybe I'd like to, but it's the different segments of it would be an education center, community, possible deals. We kind of talked about this yesterday with the idea of NIO deals, or selling this to larger corporations such as banks or schools themselves. And then lastly, a very broad or end goal would be to actually have a brokerage included. So when you combine all of this down, say potentially into an app in the coming years, this would be one app where you have the ability of Discord, right, to communicate, talk with people, view people's profile. I guess LinkedIn would be a much better service to kind of describe that. But you can share deals, talk about ideas, and then also have the ability to store your money in it, take care of and manage your money within this one app, as well as the education. And so when you break down what a brokerage currently is, these all individual sections, you kind of have a broker where you invest your money, but you talk with people elsewhere, right? And there's no educational section. Or you find an educational section, but there's no community, it's just a page, it's just articles, right? Or it's not organized for that matter. It's not an organized section of education where you can stay in this one place and learn one idea back to front, right? And then when you talk about, brokerage, community. Yeah, the community, you don't have access to that financial section either. So really looking to combine all of the sections Jeremy and I had to kind of hunt down ourselves, right? From the countless hours that we've spent researching, right? Every single market out there. What is everything and anything you can trade, right? And Jeremy and I, now that we found all those, have segmented, say, okay, you take care of these, I'll take care of these. We want to have as much information as possible, a fully encompassing approach. And an uncommon idea is we want to try and fail at everything. So we understand everything fully. And then a really important note that I like to touch on next is kind of just that mindset of what investing has, and kind of speaking specifically with the student athlete and their money. But Finletics, a very broad idea, but really looking to tie into all the missing pieces Jeremy and I found, and kind of moving past where there's a lot, like it's not necessarily as glamorous, right, as the idea might be, just because of all those people on the internet. There's all those gurus out there saying, I can guarantee I'll make you money. Give me your money and I'll flip it, right? Follow this dating strategy, you'll get rich in a week, right? There's a million of those, right? That is not at all the goal of Finletics, right? We're trying to be very careful that we don't step into that realm, right? Especially when we do start actually paying for premium services on the website. We want to make sure we don't stray into that realm of kind of being money hungry versus being driven for the people that we're working for.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think this extends to a broader thing, not only within student athletes, but just younger people, or just people in general, just like financial literacy and like taking control of your future, or like your financial future. And that definitely just starts with understanding what you're actually just investing in.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, like that's why you have like wealth management as a profession in general is a profession, is because a lot of people are just like, I don't like either want to know or care to know,
right? So
you just like outsource it again to someone else, just like manage my money. But I think what the vision and what you guys are trying to do with Finletics is extremely important. Not only within the athlete community, because it's like a tough a statistic to swallow. I'm sure even more as like a student athlete, of like how many people, like this tiniest percentage of people that end up going pro.
Yeah.
Right. Like not only from the general like universe of like athletes that start off when they're kids, but like even like collegiate athletes. How many end up not only going pro, but like able to sustain sustainably live off
Right.
of just like being an athlete.
So you're mentioning the percentage of people that go pro, right? So when you take those football guys, everything front to back has been taken care of for them. When you now place them in the real world, where money, you know, regardless of what you want to say for the outside circumstances of players getting money just for going to places, right? Then there's also the NIL deals, your image, and then there's your Olsen money, and then also just your scholarship stipend. A massive influx of money where I'm sure at the time when you're in it, say you're junior or sophomore, junior year, money probably seems endless. It's not going to stop, right? You've got another year, 2 more years, right? And then you're going pro, right? Like money's not an issue. And so when you come to that realization where so many people do, where maybe you know the statistic, but I mean it's less than 1%.
Okay.
People that go pro. I think it's far less than 1%, right? So a very, very small percentage of people. You know, people who have been treated like they are the best in the world, right, for so long, and now you have them in a position where they're not necessarily worth anything anymore, where your college, and that's a very harsh way to put that, but your college worth is no longer there. And unless you continually strive to get drafted or go to the pros, right, if you accept the realization that you're not going to make it, you have to completely shift your mindset. And I think that's very hard for people. And especially if you've grown up in this way where for so long you've been treated like this is not going to end, and all of a sudden you get here, that's just a disaster waiting to happen. And of course, graduating with potentially a degree that you got just because you were there for sports, and you now have no money coming in, and you also don't know how to deal with money. You know, you're essentially setting these athletes up for failure. And so Finletics is, of course, trying to bridge that gap a little bit and say, hey, I've been in your position, right? Like, for example, I'm 1 year out from this realization, right? I think about this all the time. And my goal in life, just a personal note, is to never work a 9 to 5. Like, that's something I've always told myself in college. I refuse to do that, right? Of course, I've had internships. Like, we had our 9 to 5 at Nike. But I'm talking a legit 9 to 5 year round. But a lot of these people are going to have to go into that. That's just a non-negotiable, right? To make your money. And so if we can kind of step in and get you thinking about what money is just on a broader scale, right? Like the idea, it's not just $1 in, $1 out, right? All the things that you can do with money and the complexities of it, right? Even yesterday, you were talking through your ideas with me, and just even the terms you're using, the ways you can manipulate and use money just to grow it or just have a better understanding is immense. I mean, there's endless possibilities. And so if we can kind of step in and just get them thinking about this at the very least, then at least they can start on their own to have a better idea. And then Finletics' ultimate goal is to provide those avenues for them, where we can say, hey, if you are serious about this, come learn what we did when we were in college. If you don't have as much time and you're not as committed to this, here's something a lot less drastic or risky, right? But it's doing something, right? And even when Jeremy was kind of developing a pitch for Finletics for some venture or for some funding things, it was just the idea of, Jeremy even broke down, if you just invested in a simple bond, right? You know, without mentioning the specific type, at a very low interest rate, I mean, you're still graduating with an extra couple thousand, right? On top of the money if you just kind of continue to put this in over 4 years. And just that amount of money there, you can see that return and say, okay, like I can do something with this. And of course that curve is exponential without going into all the specifics. You know this to a T. But if you just introduce that concept to them and get them thinking, it does wonders. And that's something I had to kind of overcome after losing. You know, I wasn't a hot shot right out the gate, right? I didn't make money. I wasn't profitable for a long time. And so when I kind of get over that fear of losing money and really decide to understand what money is and that investing thing, that's when my world changed. And that's when I kind of opened my eyes to this and saw so many more people have to be realizing this, because I think just the way that society and culture is just very detrimental to your ability to have a healthy relationship with money, but ultimately be sustainable for yourself. I know we've touched on kind of a lot of points, but people really just across the board have no concept of what this means in any regard. And so at least starting with people young and people who have maybe not the responsibilities, they don't have kids, they're not locked into that job yet where this takes, you know, all the time. They're not going for a down payment on a house. You can really just get them thinking earlier. And these athletes, right, and you kind of, these people are dreamers at the same time. You have people who want to go pro. They've dreamed of this their whole life. And unfortunately, not to become that pessimistic shade on this, but ultimately, not all of them are going to do it.
Yeah.
But these are still people who have these big ideas and can dream big. And if you can get people to think about money this way, maybe they don't end up crashing and burning once they lose their image as an athlete. And they still can identify that self-worth and still see the potential for what they can do outside of sports.
Yeah.
And kind of dealing that with money and kind of, again, just introducing it.
Yeah.
And of course, Finletics will be that opportunity where if you want to do these extra things that maybe people are hesitant to highlight, you can do these, right?
Yeah.
And Finletics not being afraid to introduce these things because we want people to understand every avenue you can do with money and you can make your decision.
Yeah. We'd love to end this episode with kind of 3 rapid fire questions.
Sure.
First of which is, who is the GOAT in your respective event, or who do you consider the GOAT in your respective event?
In my event?
Yeah.
Okay. Kirsten Warholm from Norway. He
Okay.
just set the world record at Tokyo
Gotcha.
in 2021, I guess, because they pushed it off a year. That was amazing to watch.
Gotcha.
And it was just a very memorable event. Watching him actually do that, I was actually a girlfriend at the time with her family up in the mountains watching the event over the summer, and he was actually, if you've heard of Ry Benjamin from USC, he was racing him for USA. I know Kirsten isn't actually a US athlete, but no, I think I consider him the GOAT because I think I'm very similar. We have very similar builds. Like I'm Swedish, he's Norwegian.
Yeah.
He's an absolute monster. Very similar running styles. I think I very much look up to him, and that's where I kind of I don't really attach myself to many athletes just because I don't see myself fitting in.
Yeah.
He's someone I see the full mold.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the full mold.
Yeah. If your teammates could describe you in one word, what would that be?
I gotta choose this word carefully. I know I have such swaying images on the team depending on what situation. I would like to say passionate.
Yeah.
I'm very vocal about things that I enjoy.
Yeah.
But I can get very emotional about one thing compared to the next. Or just energetic, passionate, something along the lines of a lot of energy. I can get very heated and just very, very passionate about the things that I enjoy. Very vocal about things that I have value in.
Yeah. And finally, what do you consider to be your edge?
I consider my edge to be someone along the lines of, I'm trying to think how to word this carefully, but not getting caught up in what other people think. My edge is in the sense of I think I have a very good read on people and kind of gauging what is worth my time versus what isn't. And maybe that's ironic considering I mentioned that I'm not a great networker at times. But kind of just understand, I don't get bought into the mainstream ideas anymore, right? Like I feel like I definitely don't stray into that mob mentality of just being a follower. And I think innately I find myself more in those leadership roles, especially now that I'm getting older and maturing. But my edge would be straying away from just buying into that overall mentality of anything, right? Buying into one mold for any particular topic or event that you can think of. And specific with money, right? For example, bringing it back to day trading, something that is not widely considered to be worth your time, something I've been very successful at just because I didn't listen to other people. And I find very often, even with my new ideas, that they're not well received even by potential friends, especially not teammates, right? But just not buying into that, trusting myself and really believing that will make it work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Anything you would love to plug, add?
Keep your eyes out for people listening. I know AK's starting up the podcast, but if anything that I've said has interested you, or if you're just more curious to find out more about myself or what I'm trying to do with Jeremy Cody, we can plug him as well. You can throw maybe some social medias in the description. But yeah, if you're interested in anything that we talked about or just kind of getting your hands on this, we're planning to have Finletics launched before Outdoor Nationals for track and field championships. So keep your eyes out for that. I know as far as on our social medias, we'll be very vocal about that, and I will work very hard on building up my social media presence in the future because some people need a face for the name. But yeah, keep your eyes tuned for that, especially Jeremy and I both plan to make the national championship, of course. Jeremy made it last year. He's absolutely going to do it. I plan to make it an individual event this year as well, not just on the relay. So keep your eyes tuned for that. So it should be a good year.
Awesome. Best of luck. Can't wait to hear not only updates on Finletics, but definitely see you perform the track.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
once you get back up and running.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much again for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and until next time.